Hello, I'm Rakesh Kaul. I'm Vice Chairman of Indo-American Arts Council. We are the proud sponsors of New York Indian Film Festival. This is our 21st year, and boy, do we have a remarkable portfolio of award-winning features, documentaries, and shorts for you. Please do go ahead and pre-order your selection of movies, and you can do that at knife.moviesaints.com. Movie Saints is our partner, the platform that Knife is using for a second year in a row. I'll be moderating the documentary section of Knife. And if you want to know about the idea of India, then in the immortal words of Emperor Shah Jahan, this is it, this is it. We have four directors who epitomize what Knife seeks: bold stories, courageous directors, and a final aesthetic experience that expands one's consciousness and hopefully leads to progress in a better world. Please welcome them, and we will start the conversation. Samarth, Spandan, Madhulika, and Deepthi, a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel connected with each one of you. Samarth, you were born in the borderland. I'm from the borderland. Spandan, I have such admiration for Bengali culture. I actually acted in a documentary that Ritik Ghatak did. Madhulika, your documentary about your home is in a hometown, which is my hometown. And Dipti, I'm an author of two novels that seem to have done reasonably well. I am described as India's feminist author. So I have to tell you, Sona, I love her. It was just beautiful. So I think we're going to have great conversation. And I'm going to start off with you, Samarth. Borderlands in any culture is seen as out there in the wilderness where barbarians and outlaws hang around. But somehow your stories reveal something magnificent is at work. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing there?
So thank you for making it sound as intriguing as I found it before, starting out to shoot the film. So I think what was interesting to me, I was born and brought up in a town which is 10 miles away from the India-Pakistan border. So and my education actually happened away from the border. So whenever I would introduce myself that I come from this place which is 10 miles away from the border, and especially from the India-Pakistan border, everyone would start imagining that maybe my place gets bombed every other day. So it would create a lot of intrigue around my place. So there was this connection to border areas. But at the same time, because I was meeting people from different places, I also had some liberal arts education. I realized that every time we talk about borders, the only image that comes to our mind in the Indian subcontinent, at least, is either in India-Pakistan context, Kashmir, or you imagine army and terrorists at the border. But in this whole almost scandalized conversation around border areas, we forget that there are people, everyday people. I would come back, I would look at my mother, and she's also in a border area, and then. And obviously you read more and more and you realize that there are actual people whose lives are getting impacted, and how are they dealing with it? And that's a very personal side to the whole border area experience. Like there is a external conflict, there is violence, and there are films like Border, LOC, and Lakshya. But at the same time, there is this whole experience of an everyday person at the border, and there's a lot of personal politics to it, which does not have images, which is not out there. So I think I was trying to explore that, and the only idea was to humanize border areas, look at them beyond the when we imagine violence, we imagine it to be a cross-border violence kind of a way, but to imagine the violence on an individual, which can be inflicted through the idea of a border, either living close to it or away from it. But what is that violence on an individual, and how do people deal with that violence? So that is what I was exploring through emotional personal stories.
So I'm going to have one follow-up question, and that is this. The documentary obviously starts with borderlands as being a geographical state of mind, right? There's a line, an artificial line, but now with barbed wire and guns. But somewhere in a very beautiful, poignant way, you're able to explore a different border, a border between life and death, a border between freedom and slavery, a border between, some very fundamental things. And I'm just going to mention one small episode of what I mean. There's this girl who's brought over as part of a flesh trade where she is victimized by men. Ultimately, she's rescued, and you are taping her story. And she just says, I'm going to go back to the neighboring country she was from, but she's going to return back as a lesbian. And every story you have like that makes you feel you haven't lived if you haven't been at the border.
No, actually, throughout the film, we were trying to also explore personal borders. And when I say personal border, it is an axis of identity or marginalization. So we were think like, and this is something we figured on the shoot and on the edit, because when I said the focus was not on the geography of it, my film practically does not have maps. Like the only thing you see is lines. So we are not trying to make you give you a geography lesson in the film, but at the same time we realized that okay, each of the characters, and this was a choice on the edit also, like someone their gender is probably the most important constraint in their life. For someone it's their sexuality, for someone it's actually a disability. So we were constantly looking for those factors, and in my case, I've shot with, like, one of the characters is my mother. I hope I'm allowed to give this much spoiler. The border is an emotional border between me and my mother. So we were really trying to look at borders in many different ways. Yeah.
Yes. And that's the point I wanted to bring out. So, Madhulika,
Yes,
you, like Sun Earth, are from the border also.
very much. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your story. What kicked it off, and what was striking about this story as I watched it is that you took your whole world traveled through the story. I mean, it starts off with this scene in this car where this little child is there, the father is there, the grandmother is there. But then there are the photographs, the memories are there. You travel, the whole world travels back to Kashmir, and it sort of makes you wonder that just as your whole world had to leave Kashmir, were you trying to bring all of it back to its roots? And there are many documentaries on Kashmir, some good, some bad, some ugly, but I'd never seen a treatment that tried to present an intergenerational gaze at that genocide. So tell us a little bit about how you were looking at it, what prompted it, and eager to hear more.
Yeah. So after I left Kashmir with my family in 90, I never went back for 24 years. And it, for whatever reasons, my family never took me there. So it took a lot of convincing to tell my father, please let's go and we're just gonna have a holiday and come back. We are from this place. You talk about it every day at home, but I don't know. I have people, friends who go there, but why can't we go? Of course, much later, I realized that there is a lot of angst, there's a lot of hurt, there are a lot of things that you don't want to go back and a trauma that you've carried. But with me, because I was only 6 years old, I didn't have that. I just wanted to go back. So in 2014, when I actually went with my family and I landed in Kashmir, um, I heard everyone speaking in Kashmiri, and this is a language I've only heard in four walls of my home. And suddenly I'm exposed to my parents, my sisters, everyone's talking to strangers like they've known them for years. And I felt very, very odd. And I felt like this is where I belong. And I've heard these stories. I've grown up on, like I always say, these are borrowed memories, they're not mine. I'm only hearing what the childhood they had, the life they had. And I was tired of just visualizing it, to be honest. And I wanted somewhere to create my own memories of the place. Anyway, that trip happened, and and my father refused to take us again to the house because I just said to me, see where I was born. But he didn't take us. And I left with that. And I said that I'm going to find out. Okay, maybe he doesn't want to talk about it now, but I'll find out from somewhere where my house is. And it kind of it stayed with me, and I tried to put a lot of pieces together, and it took a lot of time because there's a part of you which you don't bother about all this. I feel till an incident or an event happens in your life, and you want to reflect and say, I live in Bombay, my family now lives in Bangalore, but I was born in Kashmir, and everything, it's very confusing. And then that's when I actually started questioning, I am where am I from? Why don't I know about this place more? So I think it was a lot of personal, like, identity struggle with belonging, with understanding where do I want to be. I'm not from this place, this is my place, why can't I go back? And that's when I actually start realize that whenever I go next, I'm going to document it. And earlier it was obviously, if you've seen my film, and a lot of it is on phone. I've shot with my phone camera and whatever holiday, video cameras, whatever I had, because I didn't know it will turn into this. But like the process of documentaries is that, when you sit on the edit table, I realized that, you know, earlier I was also going with my sister because I needed people to tell me about it and I needed help to find my home. But in the process, I realized it's my own personal struggle, and that's when I understood that exile and conflict, displacement, it lingers across generations. Even though it may not have happened to a child directly, but it's going to live with them. And tomorrow, my children, their children, they will watch and they'll understand their history, and they need to know their history because you need to know your roots, is what I believe. But I realized that any kind of, very easily we say, let's go to war or whatever, without thinking that the impact it has on normal lives of people. The impact it had on my mother, who probably never understood politics the way men discuss in a family. That was another thing that I wanted to speak to more women and hear their side of stories, because they probably don't say the most loud experiences. But for my mother, she left her utensils, and that was something that she's carried till date. She keeps saying that that one set of bowls is left in the kitchen. And I thought that any kind of conflict, all of this affects people in different ways, men, women, children, in different ways. And I wanted to see what is in future for Kashmiris. So that's
So,
what I
so,
think.
so, Madhulika, there is a very painful moment right up front in the documentary where I think it's your sister. She tells you that fateful night, your father had informed the family that he would kill his own daughters rather than risk them being abducted.
Yeah.
Has your father ever talked about that?
No, it's very unfortunate. He's never spoken to me about it. But whenever I speak to my sister, and because there are things from that night which are, it's a trauma they've carried, and I think these are little things that they'll never forget. She keeps saying that, I was 13, 14, 13 and a half, whatever, but I grew up in one night because I realized that now I'll be looked at as a girl. These things have never affected or consciously never. Suddenly you're talking about being abducted and you rather be killed. And for me, that also kind of stayed with me because from that moment onwards, she realized that this is different, and then how women are looked at in all of this uh, conflict. So
So on
my
that
father
note,
never spoke
on
to me
that
about it.
note,
Yeah.
let's segue to Dipti. I think if there's some sound, if we can mute whoever's got the sound of the child. Yeah, thank you. So, Dipti, uh, Madhulika ended with a very poignant statement. She said, how women are looked at. And in Sona Shut Up, Sona says to her lawyer, and I think to her husband, who are sort of very confused, and she says, it is about the gender, stupid. So let's put that in the background. Let us start with what got you into this documentary. You spent many years. What discoveries did you make? And share a little bit about your documentary.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to this talk. I've loved listening to the filmmakers so far. Yeah, it's nicely flowed into this question. Interestingly, so actually, the documentary started with actually, I loved Sona's voice. And I had been observing her journey for 10 years because we were friends from much before when stardom happened to her in a way. And I had been discovering how that journey was in some ways, you know, there were parallels to my own and to many other people that I knew. Here's this woman, she's with every ounce of her being, she wants to express herself, and for her it's through music, or it's seizing the stage, or saying what she believes in, asking for equality. And slowly, as her career is progressing, her talent is unmistakable, but she keeps encountering these walls, which for me became an extremely important, interesting theme. So something that started with loving her voice, because I would listen to her and get goosepimples, because if she's singing to you in a room alone, it's like you suddenly start to think like, my God, is there any better gift than being musically connected? You're connected to the divine. What more do you need? But then the life of a musician like Sona reflects all the, like conflicts of our society, in fact, in the microcosm of one person's journey. I could see that when she wanted to sing Meera, or when she wanted to sing Khusro, what she was channeling, and how, not being invited to certain festivals, or asking very uncomfortable questions, like, why isn't NH7 inviting women? Why is the percentage so low? Why is there not an equal stage? Why am I being invited to a stage with my male partner when I'm the headliner? Why is it not enough? What is it that you people want? That when you get asked, when you're asking those uncomfortable questions, you're not liked for it very much, but those are the things that cause change to happen. And through Indian history, those are the kind of voices that have allowed change to happen. They're not always comfortable voices. So I started finding those aspects very, very interesting. And at the center of it is this firebrand of a character. She's an entertainer. She's hilarious. She refuses to be put down. She keeps saying uncomfortable things, and at the same time, she's extremely likable. And I felt that having a friendship with her, and being a DOP and a director of my own film, I was able to work in complete, in a way alone, which also is a strength and could be a weakness sometimes. But in this case, I felt it allowed for an intimacy that would have been very difficult to achieve any other way. And I feel so much of documentary is about, you know, in some way, one is also making films about oneself because you're discovering yourself through your films. So it became very, very cathartic for me because my journey had been of a cinematographer. When I started, I didn't know that I was going to be one of the, there are very few women cinematographers. I had no idea at all. And in Sona's journey, I started finding complete parallels. But what deeply inspired me was that she's unputdownable. She never goes down. So in the film, you see her sometimes hitting rock bottom and she bounces back up with the most amazing humor, with her art, with her sassiness, which I find is so inspiring. So for me, it became important to say a story which may have a lot of pain at the center of it, but it never stops celebrating. It never stops being joyous, and it never lets up. You never let up the fight, but you never stop being joyous. So it was like an inspiring catharsis for me, actually.
So you experienced tremendous personal growth out of this creation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's the least of what I can say. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Now, at one place, she describes herself.
Hmm.
And she describes herself in a very interesting way. She says, I'm Chandi's daughter.
Yeah.
That's where my Shakti comes from.
Yeah.
Now, most people are pretty scared of Chandi.
Yeah.
If you have to do Chandi Puja for our viewers who
Hmm.
may not be familiar with this tradition, you're not allowed to do Chandi Puja in your home unless you get a very experienced priest who really knows what they're doing according to the tradition. Because if you invoke Chandi in your home and you do it the wrong way, you know, you that's the end. And here's somebody who's saying, I am Chandi's daughter. What do you think she means when she says that?
Well, what she means is she actually believes that she's Chandi's daughter. So I suppose it's as literal as that also. She's very connected to the goddess energy in her. But I mean, observing it for years, this connection that she has, and you keep seeing it coming back in the film, and somewhere the film ends with what I feel about it, what I feel about her connection to being Chandi's daughter. So it's just a pictorial and like an emotional representation of it. But I feel it's to do with very completely harnessing a power inside of yourself. And in Sona's eyes, and I feel in many people's eyes, a woman who has completely harnessed the power inside of herself is something to be marveled at. It's almost scary, you know. So yeah, I feel that's what it means. So for me, the last sequence of the film is actually a very emotional sequence where she's walking up to the stage from behind, and there is this Shiv Shakti song happening, and it's cutting with goddess images, which have which is an old temple in Orissa. It's you just feel something there which cannot be expressed any other way than in cinema with sound and picture and editing and the whole thing. You can't write it, you can't say it, you can't tell it. You need cinema for it.
Absolutely. And we'll come back. But Spandan, in Sona, we have a singer. We also have, I would say, an actor. We also have an activist.
Yes.
And then we come to your world, Spandan. A incredible exploration of a culture, a way of life, as epitomized by an extraordinarily talented actor whose arc over time in the roles that he has portrayed actually reveal a great artist at work. And your cinematography is a tour de force in the sense that it brings the viewer inside his world. Tell us a little bit about what led you into this journey. What were the difficulties you experienced? Because it's not a commercial movie. And it, in terms of an art movie, it's one of the best documentaries that I have seen. So it must not have been an easy journey. I want the audience to learn. I want other students who follow you to learn. So share some of the whole thing from beginning and how the journey involved. What were the challenges, and how was it like to work with him? You're muted. You're muted. So just unmute yourself, please. Yeah.
Yeah. It just started pouring. That's why I muted. So yeah, what in terms of the film, just taking what Deepthi was just talking about, and working with artists and working with people who have faced the audience and who have faced the camera. I think intimacy is a very important thing. What one should look for in terms of when you're trying to capture this kind of a persona for a documentary where you want to know a little bit more of what people already know. And that way my whole, in terms of the information that is disseminated in the film, like every film has certain kind of information that you give, the information that it disseminates is the minimum in this film, because with this time of internet and information and social media, we kind of see him every time, and if we want, we can just Google him up and see 200 videos of him. So the stories and what he said and what was his experience on day X of a shoot, or how did he face this film or this, those stories have been told and repeated. What I wanted to be, what I wanted to explore was the 70s Calcutta, the flamboyance of the city where he grew up and where he performed. And that space, and he was like one of the many who would take me there and allow me to relive those moments for those few minutes. And that's what I think is the beginning of the film, because I was introduced to the 70s music and the 70s cinema by my father, who had an extensive collection of LPs. In fact, the music, all the track that has been used in the film are from his collection. And I was not really born then, but I kind of always fantasized about this whole Calcutta, the metropolis, the true cosmopolitan city, what it was then. And through his stories, I wanted to explore that. And that kind of was the main driving point for me in terms of knowing him, because I didn't really ask specific questions in terms of that what had happened. I wanted to get into a conversation with him in a very intimate space. And as documentary filmmakers, we all are kind of used to a very controlled crew and a limited unit. So that way I succeeded that. And I think that's what made him also ease up. And it was shot over a period of time. There were lots of difficulties in the process. The main difficulty being the one that we all are facing right now, the pandemic, because part of the film was shot in 2019, and then we were to shoot the rest of the film in March 2020. By then, the pandemic had hit us, so we delayed it, and we kind of somehow managed to shoot. And financially, all of us, all the crew members, all of us were like in a quite a terrible situation because of the pandemic and the lack of work. But we somehow managed, and this was the only thing which was new and which was being created in a world which is looking death and chaos. So for us, it kind of really worked that, okay, we have this little film and let's make this the best way that we can. And that's how the film kind of evolved. And in terms of the one of the technical difficulties which I was mentioning is primarily about the copyright, the usage of archival material, the usage of material that an artist creates for other people. And over the years, whether the artist has its rights or it goes to the different. Now, by legalities, of course, there is a legal way of handling things. But what I would like to say here is that you cannot look at all the usage of an X product or an X film with the same filter, because there can be certain things which are used for commercial usage and there can be certain things which are used for research or non-commercial. So there should be as a documentary filmmaker, I would definitely talk about it more, that there should be a collective who can help us with getting these kind of footage at an easier way than having a big infrastructure who can follow the legalities and get the material for their film. So that is something which I would definitely want to talk about. And yes, as that was the case, Dhritiman and me, we both kind of faced certain issues in getting some photographs or some things which would have been even better in my eye if I could have included them in the film, which I couldn't. But at the end of the day, when we watch the film and when we look at the journey, it's always a filmmaker, like I'm sure Madhulika, Deepti, Samarth will all agree that we kind of grow with the film, and we become a different person and we look at the film in a different way also. So that, I think, is the most important driving factor that all of us are are into, because that is what makes it happen. And I have done films with musicians before, like Dipti was mentioning, and there also I remember I was shooting a band who had a 5-member band, and there was only me and my cinematographer, and even my sound guy was recording the sound from the other room, because I wanted that intimacy, I wanted that freedom, which usually people get a little bit of intimidated when they see a big setup or lights. And so that kind of thing, like when I shoot with kids, I spend 3 days before shooting just to hang with them, just to gain their trust. They need to trust you a little bit. They need to be able to talk to you and play, and not just see the dada or see the man who comes with a camera and asks questions. So that was the process, and that's why we had a lot of conversations and we had a lot of things. But the film was kind of there in my head before making it. So in terms of the editing, I edited it myself. In fact, this was the first feature-length film that I edited myself. And I think I didn't face much of an issue in terms of which a lot of documentary filmmakers also face in terms of the footage and how do we go through it. But in terms of the editing, I had a lovely time and I remember when in between the edit, there was a point when we had met, and I told him that, I can't really look at you now because at home I'm watching you constantly. So I don't really know that this conversation or this coffee will be very productive, because I have nothing to say, because now I'm out of it and I'm just editing the film. So this has been the process, and showing it here in terms of, in spite of the problems that we faced, showing it at NYIFF will be a fantastic thing. And I have already had a lot of inquiries and a lot of people who are curious about the film, and they have bought the tickets. That's what they have told me. So I think it should have a decent screening there. And I would like to point out one more thing, Rakesh, which maybe you're the best person to tell me. But I just wanted to know the dynamics of the audience for a film festival, because just this is also true for all of us, because we have all kind of attended various film festivals and we know the energy that it generates and what it creates. And suddenly, right now, we are all in our individual spaces, and but at the same time, the good part of it is that the audience of a film has increased from being in the Lincoln Center or being in the other that what was the Tribeca theater. Other than that, it moved to a worldwide audience. So how do you like? What is how do you see this as a new beginning for film's outreach?
Good question. I think eventually there's no going back. I think all film festivals. We were last year. We were the first major film festival to go virtual. It was a gamble. We made that pivot in 6 weeks, and I led the charge on behalf of IAC, and everybody's heart was in their mouth. Uh, but it was watched in 93 countries, and about 176,000 people watched the awards night. So there's no question that now we're going to have digital be part of the film festival going forward. But there's also something very special to the energy of bringing all of you guys to New York, having the red carpet, having actually uh, people running up to you in terms of people who are interested in your subject matter. You can't substitute for that. So no going back, but certainly I think a more powerful hybrid model will emerge. Absolutely. So, I have to say, Spandan, I hope that obviously, if I, as a vice chairman, pick only you guys to moderate, it shows how much importance I attach to the work that documentary makers in India are doing. And I hope that the audience watches each one of your movies. And specifically in your case, Spandan, hats off to you. Your subject was clearly a master of his craft. And the way you approached it also reveals a mastery in the creation. And I'm so glad that you said you edited it also. So now it was not, your composition was not just about the story. It's actually a signature. There's a signature to it. The way Satyajit Ray's movies have a signature, the way Ritik Ghatak's documentaries have a signature. You created a signature composition, and I just want you to know that.
That's I think the best compliment I've got so far, and it's like I don't know what to say, but I just tried to do what felt best, and in a way, if I have managed to get the thing, because I see my films as one of many, because I would want other people also to go on the same subject and make one more, because also it depends on the, as you said, like how you what your interaction with your subject is. So that way, yeah, I can only humbly say thank you so much, because it's been a it's been a wonderful thing that to be here and to be able to talk to all of you. I wish we could meet physically, and hopefully one day we can. We are all in different parts of the world, but yeah, watch the film, and I really wish I watched the other films before I got into this
You
conversation,
will,
because
you
now I'm
will,
really keen to watch,
you
because now
will,
I know the stories and it has just worked as a perfect teaser for
you
to
will, you will.
watch the
Samat,
films.
let's come back to you now, and we'll open the floor for discussion. One of your characters, Samarth, makes a very interesting statement. And I want an open discussion from all of you, because I think each one of you, each one of you touches on this subject. So I want to start with you, Samarth, because I want to know how you saw it. She says, life gave me no choice. And in Sona, we see the world trying to restrict Sona's choices. In Madhulika, we see the world giving her and her sisters very evil choices. So, choice, individual freedom, the ability to lead your life to the fullest. Let's start with you. What was your documentary trying to say to the world?
So I think actually this is something that two of the characters say, and both the characters happen to be women. One of them being my mother, and one of the characters being someone who's separated from her family by the India-Bangladesh border. So I think with my film, what I was trying to do was to suggest that a lot of things that happen in our life are not in our control. Actually, they are decided as soon as we are born. So gender being a very important factor, but we can't choose to just be born in a city like Delhi. We can't choose to be born in a certain caste. We can't choose to be born rich. So a lot of these choices are just not there. And I think in my film, I was trying to explore how do people cope with those situations, like in spite of not having choices. uh, I think every person tries to seek happiness, every person tries to seek hope and the best life for themselves. So how do people actually cope with it? So in one of the characters case, who's my mother, she's made her whole life about her husband, her kids, and that becomes the center of her universe. uh, and like Madhulika talked about how it's very easy to sit in Calcutta and Delhi and talk about war, all out war. Sometimes at the same time, what is it for a mother in a border area to imagine a war like scenario in her home? So it's something she can't control, but she has an opinion on. She visits the Wagah border, looks at what happens there, and the only thing she says is कि रोज रोज करने की जरूरत क्या है? मतलब it's just going to create more and more problem. It's her way of just looking at the world. She can't control. She has an opinion. She expresses it, and I think it comes out more poignantly in the other story where uh, you probably have the option to see your family only once a year, and what happens then? How do you make peace with that? And for us as filmmakers, you imagine such a scene and you imagine it to be a sob fest. You can almost predict it to be a sob fest, but then with what elegance are people meeting each other at that event? What are they doing? I think for us it was very surprising how our character dealt with the lack of choice in that context, and I think that's something we explored throughout the film. In spite of all these constraints, how do we go on? How do we find happiness? How do we find meaning? So that's how I think Borderlands was trying to deal with the idea of choice.
And did it very well. Dipti, uh, Samarth has touched upon lack of choice. He's talked about accident of birth. He's talked about how, in spite of it, human beings try to find hope and human beings try to seek dignity. What is your story? What does Sona reveal about this very fundamental issue that life is unfair? You're muted. You're muted, Dipti.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I feel, I mean, you're right in a way. You know, I haven't seen the films, but from what we have all talked about, this is kind of a very central theme. You know, and when it comes to choice, I mean, Shut Up Sona takes a very simple stance. It says, don't shut up. The world is going to tell you to be quiet. Don't voice yourself. Don't ask for more. Don't be uncomfortable. But we can't let that voice die down. It's the human thing. If you look at it spiritually, is to expand. If you look at it as a human being, is to try and get the experiences which you feel are your calling, and we can't let the outside world stop us. And that's what the Sona keeps demonstrating through the film. She's doing it through music, she's doing it through activism, she's doing it on stage. And there's even a kind of a tussle between me as a filmmaker and her as a protagonist in one or two places in the film, which is again a very similar thing. So I feel Shut Up Sona is actually basically about saying we can't just go quiet. We have to keep exploring, keep asking, going within and outside in the world, trying to question status quo and not just not just be okay with if the accident of birth has placed you in a certain place, but if there's something that you need for yourself, your soul needs it, then you have to keep going, moving towards that.
Very
Yeah.
well said. Very well said. And Madhulika, Dipti talks about if you had a small or a big act of injustice done to you, an act that's grossly unfair, that never give up. Never give up, otherwise, it will keep repeating. What do you think your story's takeaway would be for a viewer on this issue of life's unfairness, life's injustice, and what should, as Samarth said, you can't control what life does to you, but you can control your response. Dipti's one answer is never shut up. So, what does your story prescribe?
Okay, so when you also talking earlier about choice, I feel in my film there are two generations. One which is not given a choice at all, but now there is my generation who, well, has an option or has a choice to go back. But I feel from my film, I wanted it to be a conversation starter of some sorts, that acknowledging injustice and also uh, how what do we do about it now? Because obviously, like has happened. We cannot undo that. But from here on, where do we go? And what are the choices we make now as a society, as a community, as individuals towards this? I hope that answers what you know I was trying to say.
Yeah, that's well said. So, Spandan,
Mm,
Madhulika suggests that when there's great injustice done by the oppressor
mm,
against the victim, that before one can conceive of reconciliation, conversation has to start, truth has to come out, because without truth, there can be no lasting understanding. What is your takeaway of the human condition? How do you see that? You're muted, Spandan. You're muted. You're muted, Spandan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So I'll try to see conflict and identity has been there, and it has been the primary source, or the what how should I say, inspiration for a lot of work over the years eternally. Like the Calcutta that I was talking about, the Calcutta that fantasized me, and the Calcutta that I loved, and through Talking Head or some more films, maybe I want to see more of that Calcutta. We have to remember that Calcutta was also coming after the 1965 Indo-Bangladesh War, the Indo-Pakistan War, and the 1971 Bangladesh War. So the Calcutta, the politics of the city, and the politics of the so-called intellectuals who could afford the education, and that created that space. So like the way in today's term, like what I could make out from the conversation about borderland, the same conflict, the same issues, similar things were there, and there were various outputs, like the little girl who's totally optimistic. That's how in the 70s what had happened in Bengal, in Calcutta, was an outcome of that conflict, and an outcome of that scar, which kind of over years we live with, and often we identify those scars, and often we become so used to it that we don't even know how to address it. So that, I think, remains like a very, very important thing. So if you look at the films that but talking about my film, the films that this actor had acted in, the characters that he had portrayed, the characters spoke of that time. The characters spoke of that time, who that youth who is completely disillusioned. They don't know where to go because after the war, with the political scenario, after 3 years, emergency was declared. So 70s that way politically was a hugely volatile space for India, and how Calcutta responded to it and what happened to Calcutta kind of comes in glimpses through my film. And there is a section, instead of not it's not really a spoiler, but there is a whole section where me and Jitiman, we talk about it, and he talks about this whole fundamental of what happened with the trade unions and the new signs of revolt and the new signs of protest which used to be there in Bengal then. And it, of course, it impacts that character, and the man that he is, or the film that you see, comes out from that space, from that conflict. So that way, of it is all of us somehow in some way are kind of bound by that common thread of the conflict.
Thank you, Spandan. And on that note, boy, how time passes. But viewers, uh, I can't tell you what a treat you have awaiting you in the documentaries that we discussed today. Uh, each documentary is a jewel in its own way, and your guides, the creators here, are going to take you into worlds which will certainly be not just eye opening, but mind opening, and most importantly, heart opening. You will come out of the experience with a much better sense of what the idea of being an Indian is, because they have brought stories to you that represented a lot of pain, a lot of sacrifice, a lot of hardship, and they have succeeded, because to be at NYIFF means that they are the best of the best. I end by saluting you, Spandan, Madhulika, Dipti, and Samarth. Uh, I really look forward to your creative works in the future. Look forward to having you back at NYIFF, but so pleased, so proud that you have given us the opportunity to bring your creations to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this lovely
Thank you,
conversation.
sir. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
For getting all of us here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.